My name is Ethan Finch. At 64 years old, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old Ford Taurus, the scent of stale coffee and desperation clinging to the upholstery. The glowing red sign of a Big Belly burger illuminated the parking lot, casting a hellish glow on the crumpled receipts and empty water bottles that littered the passenger seat. I had exactly $11.42 in my wallet. A week ago, I'd owned a business. A month ago, I'd owned a home. Tonight, I owned the clothes on my back and the dying car I was trying to sleep in. Finch and Son Construction, 38 years. I'd started with a second-hand pickup truck, a toolbox inherited from my father, and a back that didn't complain after 14-hour days. I built it from the ground up, from patching roofs to building custom homes in the most affluent neighborhoods of Crestwood Falls. My son, Leo, had been my son in the company name since he was old enough to hold a hammer. I dreamed of handing him the keys one day, of watching him take the business to heights I'd never imagined. But dreams are fragile things, and reality is a sledgehammer. The Franklin Project was the one that broke us, a multi-million-dollar community center. We'd hit bedrock where the soil tests promised sand. The foundation cracked, the delays mounted, and the lawsuits rained down like artillery fire. The client, a ruthless developer named Silas Vance, didn't believe in acts of God or unforeseen geology. He believed in contracts and crushing anyone who stood between him and his profit. My insurance company, the den of weasels in expensive suits, found a loophole the size of a freight train and denied my claim. The judgment was for $3 million. I lost the company, then the house. The bank, which had happily taken my mortgage payments for 25 years, showed all the compassion of a glacier. They gave me 30 days to vacate. I sold my tools, my equipment, anything of value that wasn't bolted down. The money evaporated, a slow leak that accelerated into a torrent. Storage units, cheap motels, gas, food. That's how I ended up on the pristine porch of my son's 2-story colonial in the Oak Haven Estates subdivision on a Tuesday evening. The suitcase in my hand felt heavier than its contents, weighted with a lifetime of pride that had been ground into dust. Leo answered the door, his expression a confusing mix of surprise and apprehension. "Dad, I thought you weren't coming until the weekend." "Plans changed," I said, my voice raspy. I tried to sound casual, but the tremor was there. "Is this a bad time?" Before he could answer, his wife, Chloe, materialized behind him. She was a woman sculpted by Pilates and maintained by a subtle but constant air of dissatisfaction. She'd never been my biggest fan, but the look she gave me now was different. It was a cold, clinical assessment, like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match the decor. "Ethan," she said, my name a flat, unwelcome sound. "Leo mentioned you were between homes." I shifted the suitcase. "I was hoping I could crash on your couch for a few days, just until I get my feet under me. I won't be any trouble." Chloe's smile was a thin, bloodless line. She didn't look at me. She looked at Leo, and I saw the silent communication pass between them, a marital Morse code of displeasure. "The thing is, Ethan," she began, her voice adopting a syrupy, condescending tone I knew all too well, "we have the annual neighborhood block party this weekend, and we're hosting the committee. The house is going to be chaos, and you know how our guest room is. It's practically a closet. It wouldn't be fair to you." I looked at Leo, my own son, the boy I'd taught to shave, the young man I'd consoled after his first heartbreak, the groom whose wedding I'd paid for without a second thought. He couldn't meet my gaze. He studied the welcome mat as if it held the secrets of the universe. "There's a Redwood Inn about 15 minutes away," Leo mumbled, finally looking up with pained eyes. "It's clean, affordable, maybe just for a night or two." Affordable. I'd checked online. It was $98 a night. 3 nights would clean me out. "Sure," I lied, the word ash in my mouth. "That sounds perfect." Chloe's demeanor transformed instantly, the tension draining from her shoulders. "Wonderful.
And once you're settled somewhere more permanent, we'll have you over for a proper dinner. Maybe next month. Next month. The dismissal was so complete, so absolute, it stole the air from my lungs. I hugged Leo goodbye, a stiff, awkward embrace. For a second, his arms tightened and a flicker of the son I knew surfaced. I thought he might change his mind, might tell Chloe that his father needed help, and that was the end of the discussion. Instead, he just patted my back. "Take care of yourself, Dad," he whispered. The sound of their front door closing behind me was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I sat in my Taurus in their driveway for a long time, watching the shadows move behind the blinds of their perfect home. The lawn was emerald green, the flower beds a riot of color-coordinated blooms. It was a picture of success, a life I had helped build. The Redwood Inn was fully booked. So was the Motor Lodge next door and every other budget-friendly place within a 20-mile radius. A tech convention had devoured every available room in the city. By 10 p.m., I was parked behind a 24-hour truck stop trying to contort my 6-foot frame into a position that wouldn't leave me paralyzed by morning. The irony was a bitter pill. Ethan Finch, who had built shelters for hundreds, was homeless. That's when my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. Desperation is a powerful motivator. I answered. "Mr. Ethan Finch." The voice was cultured, precise, with an old-world formality. "Speaking." "My name is Alistair Croft. I am calling on behalf of my employer, Mr. Sterling Morrigan. He has requested your presence for a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. The matter is of some urgency." I sat up, wincing as my back protested. "I'm sorry, who? Sterling Morrigan? I don't believe I know him." "Mr. Morrigan is quite insistent. He is unwell, and time is a commodity he possesses in short supply. He is prepared to compensate you handsomely for your time. Would $1,000 be sufficient for a meeting of approximately 1 hour? $1,000. The number hung in the air, surreal and impossible. It was more money than I'd held in months. I thought of my empty wallet, the gas gauge hovering near E, the cold certainty of another night in this car. "Where?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "The address is 1 Obsidian Point. I will text it to you. Shall we expect you at 10? "I'll be there." The line went dead. A moment later, my phone chimed with the address. I plugged it into my GPS. Obsidian Point. It wasn't a street. It was a destination. The most exclusive enclave in the state. A place where estates were hidden behind walls and gates, their values measured in tens of millions of dollars.
Sleep was impossible. The night was a long, cold slide into self-pity and confusion. Why me? What could a dying billionaire possibly want with a failed contractor? My mind raced through possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. In the gray light of dawn, I cleaned up as best I could in the truck stop bathroom. The man in the mirror was a stranger, gaunt, with deep grooves of stress framing his mouth, his hair a wild mane of gray. I looked every one of my 64 years, and then some. The drive to Obsidian Point was like entering another country. The gate was a masterpiece of wrought iron and polished brass, flanked by stone pillars. A discreet intercom buzzed before I could even speak. "Mr. Finch, please proceed. Follow the main drive to the house." The driveway was a mile-long ribbon of crushed gravel, winding through manicured forests and past a lake so still it looked like glass. The house, when it appeared, was not a house. It was a fortress of modern architecture, soaring glass walls, cantilevered concrete planes, weathered steel. It was brutal and beautiful, a statement of immense power and taste. I parked my battered Ford between a Porsche Cayenne and a vintage Jaguar, feeling like a trespasser.
The man who greeted me at the towering front door was exactly the embodiment of the voice on the phone. Alistair Croft was tall, lean, and ageless, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit. His handshake was brief and cool. "Mr. Finch, a pleasure. Mr. Morgan is waiting in the library." He led me through an interior that was more art gallery than home. The air was still and silent, the only sound the whisper of our footsteps on polished concrete floors. The walls were adorned with massive, intimidating paintings, and sculptures of twisted metal and smooth stone stood sentinel in the open spaces. The library was a sanctuary of dark wood and soft light. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held thousands of volumes, and a massive fireplace dominated one wall. Seated in a high-backed leather chair near the fire was Sterling Morgan. He was shockingly frail, a skeleton draped in cashmere blanket. An oxygen tube was tucked under his nose, and his hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were thin and speckled with age. But his eyes, a piercing electric blue, were alive with fierce intelligence. They scanned me, taking in every detail of my worn jeans and scuffed work boots. "Ethan Finch," he said, his voice a dry rustle, yet commanding. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." I took the chair opposite him. "Mr. Morgan, your butler said it was urgent." "Alistair is my majordomo, not my butler. There is a difference," Morgan corrected gently. "And yes, it is urgent. My time is measured in weeks, perhaps days. Pancreatic cancer. A vicious, thorough killer." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. I've had 87 years, most of them good, but I have unfinished business." He leaned forward slightly, the movement requiring obvious effort. "Tell me, Ethan, do you remember a night 9 years ago on the old coastal highway, Route 101, just north of Ravenswood Cove? A storm, a car accident?" A jolt like a live wire went through me. The memory was one I had deliberately buried, a raw, painful scar on my psyche. The lashing rain, the howling wind, the sickening skid. "I remember," I said, my throat tight. "You were driving a red Ford F-150, a work truck." "How could you know that?" "Because, Ethan," he said, those blue eyes locking onto mine, "because I was in the black Mercedes that you swerved to avoid, the one that went over the cliff." The world tilted. I could smell the salt spray and the rain, feel the steering wheel wrenching in my hands. I'd been driving back from a remote work site, exhausted. The storm had come out of nowhere, a true Pacific tempest. On a blind curve, a car had come speeding around the bend, hydroplaning directly into my lane. I had a split second to decide. Head-on collision or the guardrail? I chose the rail. You went over," I stammered. "It was a 100-foot drop to the rocks." 72 feet, to be precise," Morgan corrected. "The car landed in a thicket of pine trees, which likely saved my life. The impact knocked me unconscious. The car was crumpled. I was trapped." The memories flooded back, vivid and horrifying. After my truck had slammed into the guardrail, steam pouring from the radiator, I'd stumbled out into the storm. I'd heard no crash from below, just the roaring wind. But then I'd seen it. A faint, flickering glow through the sheets of rain. A fire. "You climbed down," Morgan stated. "In that storm, down a sheer, muddy cliff face. You fell, more than once." I had. I'd slid and tumbled, my hands ripped to shreds by rocks and branches, driven by a single primal thought. Someone is in that car. I'd reached the wreck, a tangled heap of metal wedged between two trees. The engine was smoking, and I could smell gasoline. The driver's side was crushed, but the passenger window was shattered. "You reached in through the broken glass," Morgan continued, his voice barely a whisper. You cut your arms pulling me out. I was a dead weight. You carried me, fireman style, up that cliff. The doctors said if I'd been in that wreck for 5 more minutes, I would have bled out internally. I sat in silence, the crackling of the fireplace, the only sound. I remembered the agonizing climb back up, my muscles screaming, the unconscious man on my shoulders, the rain washing the blood from my arms. I remembered flagging down a trucker, the frantic ride to the hospital, waiting until a weeping woman, his daughter, had arrived. You saved my life, Ethan. And then you disappeared. You never gave your name to the police. You never contacted me. Why? I shrugged, a helpless gesture. You were alive. That's all that mattered. I figured you had your family. I had my own problems to deal with. Your own problems, Morgan repeated, a strange, sad smile playing on his lips. Do you know why I was on that road that night, Ethan? In such a hurry? I shook my head. I was fleeing. My company, Morgan Global, was about to be exposed. I had engaged in, questionable practices. Insider trading, bribery of foreign officials. The SEC was days from raiding our offices. I was facing decades in prison. I was driving to a private airfield where a jet was waiting to take me to a country with no extradition treaty. The confession hung in the air, stark and shocking. The accident changed the calculus, he said. While I was in a coma for 3 days, my lawyers, led by the relentless Alistair, found a way to contain the damage. They cut deals, offered up scapegoats, paid staggering fines. By the time I woke up, the worst had passed. I was stripped of my CEO title, but I avoided prison. I was given a second chance. He gestured weakly around the magnificent room. This, all of this, I built in the 9 years since that night. I took the remnants of my fortune and invested in things I actually believed in. Green technology, medical research. My net worth is now just over $1.2 billion. And all exists because you, a stranger, chose to climb down a cliff in a storm. I don't know what to say, I murmured, overwhelmed. You don't have to say anything. You just have to listen. He picked up a thick vellum envelope from the table beside him. This is my last will and testament. It was signed and notarized 48 hours ago. In it, I disinherit my 2 children, Cassandra and Julian, who are avaricious, shallow creatures who have done nothing but wait for me to die. They will receive a token sum, enough to ensure they cannot successfully contest the will.
He held the envelope out to me. You, Ethan Finch, are the sole beneficiary of the remainder of my estate. Everything. This house, my corporate holdings, my investments, my art collection, all of it is yours. The air left my lungs. I stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. No, that's insane. You can't do that. I can't accept it. You can and you will. The legal work is done. There is no undoing it. When I die, you will become one of the wealthiest men in this state. But why? I demanded, my voice rising. What I did, it was basic human decency. It doesn't warrant this. Basic human decency is the rarest commodity on earth, Ethan, he snapped, a flash of his former power in his eyes. Do you know what you did after you pulled me from that wreck?
You sat on the wet ground in the pouring rain, cradling my head in your lap, using your own shirt to staunch the bleeding from my head. You talked to me, told me to hold on, that help was coming. You didn't know if I was a saint or a serial killer. You saw a human being in need and you acted. In my 87 years, you are the only person who has ever shown me such selfless compassion." He slumped back into his chair, the outburst draining him. "I have spent the last 9 years watching you, Ethan, not in a sinister way," he added, seeing the alarm on my face, "but I wanted to know the man who saved me. I've followed your career, your life. I know about Finch & Son Construction. I know about the Franklin Project and Silas Vance. I know you lost everything." The revelation was a fresh shock. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been ensuring the only good man I've ever known was doing all right. And recently, you have not been doing all right." He picked up a sleek tablet from his table, tapped the screen, and turned it toward me. It showed a series of photographs taken from a distance. Me standing on Leo's porch, me walking back to my car, my shoulders slumped. "I know you went to your son for help." My face grew hot with a mixture of shame and anger. "That's none of your business." "It became my business the moment they turned you away," he said, his voice cold. He tapped the screen again, and an audio recording began to play. Chloe's voice. "Leo, we cannot have him here. It sets a precedent. My parents would never dream of asking to stay with us." Leo's voice, weary. "He's my father, Chloe. He has nowhere else to go." "That's not our problem. He's a grown man who failed to plan for his future. We have our own lives. We have the block party, and my sister is coming next week. We don't have the emotional capacity for this right now." The recording stopped. I felt physically ill. "There's more," Morgan said, his expression grim. "Conversations they had after you left. They were worried you'd ask for money. They discussed how to gently guide you toward government assistance." He pulled a file from a drawer and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements, credit reports, loan applications, all in Leo and Chloe's names. "Your son's architectural firm is failing, Ethan. He's leveraged to the hilt. Chloe spends $5,000 a month on online retailers alone. They're 3 months behind their mortgage. The bank has sent them a default notice." I leafed through the documents, my hands cumbling. The perfect life, the beautiful house. It was all a facade, a house of cards built on a mountain of debt. "They're broke," I whispered, the truth dawning with horrific clarity. Because admitting they needed help would have shattered their carefully constructed illusion. It was easier to paint you as the failure than to face their own failures. He handed me a second, smaller envelope, this one sealed with dark red wax. "This is for you. Do not open it until after my passing. It contains clarifying information about your son and about the circumstances of your business's failure. It will help you see the full picture." "What picture?" I asked, my head spinning.
"The truth, Ethan, however painful it may be." He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. "They will come for you, you know, when the news breaks. They will come with tears and apologies, talking about family and forgiveness. You need to be ready. You need to know who they truly are." I left Obsidian Point an hour later, my mind reeling. The sealed envelope felt like a lead weight in my pocket. As I drove down the mountain, I passed the turnoff for Oak Haven Estates. On impulse, I turned in. I parked across the street from Leo's house and just watched. I saw him and Chloe through the kitchen window, laughing about something. They looked happy, secure, untroubled. The perfect American family. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt a cold, clear certainty. Sterling Morgan was right. I needed to know the truth. He died 4 days later,
Alistair Croft called me with the news. The will reading was a small, brutal affair in the same library where we'd met. His children, Cassandra and Julian, were there. Beautiful, petulant, and furious. When Pemberton, the lawyer, read the terms, their outrage was a physical force in the room. "This is an outrage," Julian shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Who is this vagrant? He brainwashed our father." Cassandra dissolved into theatrical sobs. "Daddy would never do this to us. He loved us." The lawyer calmly presented the evidence of their financial exploitation, their years of neglect. They were each left with $200,000, a life-changing sum for most, a cruel pittance to them. The rest, everything, was mine. As I walked out of the room, a billionaire several hundred times over, my phone buzzed. It was Leo. "Dad? Oh my God, Dad, is it true? About Sterling Morgan? The news is saying his entire fortune to an unnamed local man, and people are saying it's you." "It's me," I said, my voice flat. There was a stunned silence, followed by a choked sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's incredible. Listen, Chloe and I, we feel awful about the other day. We were under so much stress, we weren't ourselves. We want to make it up to you. Please, come for dinner tonight. We need to celebrate. We're family." "I'll think about it," and hung up. That night, in the quiet of the penthouse suite Alistair had arranged for me at the Grand Crestwood Hotel, I broke the wax seal on Sterling Morgan's final envelope. Inside were not just documents, but a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop. The first file was a video. It showed security footage from a site-trailered Franklin project. The timestamp was from over a year ago. I saw two men entering the trailer after hours. One was the site foreman I'd trusted for 15 years. The other was my son, Leo. My blood ran cold. I turned up the volume. Leo's voice was, "It has to look like a soil issue. Can you tweak the core samples? Make it look like the preliminary reports were wrong." The foreman, "It's risky, Leo. Your dad." "Leo, my dad is old-fashioned and too trusting. This is how business is done. Silas Vance has promised me a vice presidency and a 7-figure bonus if this project goes his way. Once the lawsuit bankrupts my dad, I'll buy the company name out of bankruptcy for pennies and fold it into Vance's operation. It's the future." The video ended. I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal so profound that it was a physical pain in my chest. My own son. He had sabotaged me. He had conspired with the man who destroyed me. The other files were bank records, showing regular, sizable payments from a shell corporation linked to Silas Vance to an account in Chloe's name. She was in on it. They had funded their lavish lifestyle with blood money, the price of my destruction. The final item was a handwritten note from Sterling.
Ethan, my investigators dug deeper into your business collapse than the official records. I discovered this. I am so sorry. Some truths are a poison, but it is a poison you must swallow to be truly free. Do with this information what you will, but know this: you are not avenging yourself. You are administering justice. There is a difference. SM. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city lights, the pieces of my shattered life reassembling into a new, horrifying picture. The lawsuit, the bankruptcy, the loss of my home. It wasn't bad luck. It was a targeted assassination, and the triggerman was my own flesh and blood. The next evening, I went to dinner at Leo's house. It was a masterpiece of hypocrisy. Chloe greeted me with a tearful hug.
Ethan, we're so sorry. We were just so worried about you. We thought tough love was the answer. The table was set with their finest. Leo poured expensive wine, his hands shaking slightly. We're family, Dad. Nothing is more important than family. I let them perform their little play. I ate the over-seasoned steak and drank the wine that tasted like ash. I listened to their plans for my money, the investments Leo could help me with, the charities Chloe wanted to start. When the meal was over, I set my napkin on the table. It's a compelling performance, I said quietly. They fell silent. What performance, Dad? Leo asked, a nervous smile on his face. The loving son, the devoted daughter-in-law. It's very convincing. I reached into my jacket and pulled out 2 envelopes. I tossed them on the table. I brought you a gift. Leo picked his up, a confused look on his face. He opened it. Inside was a check made out to him for $100,000. Chloe's contained the same. Dad, this is... Thank you, Leo stammered. It's not a gift, I said. It's a payment. Consider it a consulting fee. For what? Chloe asked, her eyes wide with greed and confusion. For teaching me the true value of family, I said. I placed the USB drive on the table between them. I believe you're both familiar with its contents. Leo's face went from confused to pale to a mask of sheer terror in the span of a second. He knew. Dad, I can explain. There is no explanation that will matter, I said, standing up. The video, the bank records, it's all being delivered to the district attorney and the SEC as we speak. Silas Vance will be joining you in the defendant's box. You didn't just betray me, Leo. You committed fraud. You conspired to bankrupt a company for personal gain. Chloe was crying now, real tears of panic. Ethan, please, he's your son. Is he? I asked, looking at the man I had raised, who now looked like a stranger. A son doesn't do what he did. A son doesn't destroy his father's life for a vice presidency and a new BMW. I walked to the door. Leo was sobbing, his head in his hands. What are you going to do? He cried. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the ruins of the family I thought I had. I'm going to live my life, I said, and you are going to live with the consequences of yours. The fallout was swift and public. Leo and Chloe were arrested. Their house was seized by the bank. The story was a media sensation. Billionaire benefactor brings down traitorous son. Silas Vance's empire began to crumble under the weight of multiple investigations. I used Morgan's fortune to do what I had always loved, build. I started the Finch Morgan Foundation, funding vocational training and housing for the homeless. I didn't just build houses, I built futures. I never spoke to Leo again. His sentencing hearing was 6 months later. I didn't attend. I was on a hilltop, overlooking the foundation's first completed project, a community center for at-risk youth. It was a beautiful building, strong, honest, and built to last. A cool breeze blew across the hilltop. I thought of Sterling Morgan, the dying billionaire who gave me a second chance, and of Margaret, my wife, who would have known exactly what to do. I had lost one family, born of blood and betrayal, but I was building a new one, born of purpose and compassion. I closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I was at peace. The revenge wasn't in the ruin of my son's life, it was in the redemption of my own. And that was a story worth living.